Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episodes of Pennyworth. This was a back-to-back episode situation. I'm talking about episodes 3 and 4. Do note I am watching these one at a time, but obviously for you, this is all going to be edited together. So if you don't want to hear what I had to say about episode 3 and just want to skip to what I had to say about episode 4, I'll include the time code so that you can do that. But first and foremost, let's start off with episode 3. A lot of interesting things went down, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, that was kind of an interesting intro. Obviously, like everything with Alfie's mom, and you know, her walking down the street and seeing that little girl. Part of me was almost thinking like, is that in her head? But it's like, no, that's I was thinking that was interesting, like considering her just, I guess because she's kind of lost a little bit of that spark in her life, just because, you know, like having lost, you know, her husband and everything. I think it just made her kind of just, you know, and I think probably being home, you know, once again, last episode kind of made it clear too, once again, that she had lost that spark. But the bombings, and then like she picks up that little girl and ends up taking her back to her house because the little girl got injured. I love that, like, basically Alfie's just like having a regular dream. Like, I mean, he's sleeping and then glass breaks and then he sits up and it's almost just, the whole scene ends up being so nonchalant because it's like, wait, Dad. He's like, oh, you're dead. He's like, I mean, like, oh, you look kind of bad. He's like, well, you don't look good yourself, son. He's like, you're alive. He's like, am I alive? I don't know. I mean, he's like, you're here. And also, I love just a little bit of the, I found it a little funny, but I don't know if it was meant to be, but just his dad, him being like, oh, do you know who took my, and he's like, first of all, he was like, we're going to America. He was almost, really? Why would you do that? I forgot, like, he was criticizing, like, burgers or something like that, like, oh, like, you know, what they eat in America versus what they eat in, England, London in particular, but also like, it's like, oh yeah, you know who took our money? He's like, why the fuck would I know that? It's like, oh, because you're above, you know. He's like, what, you think I'm on the clouds, like playing a harp? He's like, who's to say I'm dead? Who's to actually say I'm not actually somewhere alive? And it's like, it makes you wonder, is that supposed to imply like his death? Well, because truth be told, because he even said in something like, did you see a body? Because from what we know, Alfie shot him. To be fair, he was right next to the, you know, explosives. So there's, you know, but Alfred didn't shoot to kill. He just shot to injure his dad. I mean, it might have been a shot to kill, but nevertheless, but basically, his dad was giving him like, oh, like, if you kind of have some idea of who did, because, you know, it's usually like the people you trust are closest to you, and then his dad jumps out the window. But I like that because, like, you don't know if that's just Alfie going a little crazy just because of everything going on. Was he half asleep? What that was, because he was already sitting up. So it's like, it's just hard to say when the dream ended. So that could have just been in his head and him not. But he claims it was a dream when he ends up talking to Baza and Dave Boy later on. But I love that there's that dude Ken selling that ring, basically being like, oh, this ring is so good, you're going to basically be able to get a nun in a sack. I'm like, Jesus. Which is also interesting, too, just because like you're like, oh, that's such a little thing that ends up playing a bigger role in the episode. But we'll get to that soon enough. But I love that, like, it's like Alfie's like, oh, I think I know who stole our money. How I know is because of a dream. It's like, well, to be fair, that dream stuff kind of helped him figure out who killed Esme last season. Granted, that was with the help of a witch, but still, you know, dreams, you know, tell you something that basically your consciousness, like, already knows. So it's like he already kind of knew it. That was just his brain manifesting a way to kind of tell him what he already knew. But it's like everything points to Gully. It's just because, well, he, you know, it's like, well, who's not afraid of us? And Dave Boy's like, honestly, there's not many people that aren't afraid of us. And it's like, obviously, he knew we had the money, so it looks like it's Gully. But it's like, rather than just, you know, it's like, well, I'm going to confront him and ask him myself. So there's a whole interesting scene between Alfred and Melanie, his wife. And she's like, oh, you're not who I thought you were. And even him, she's like, oh, you have a gun on you. And he was like, I'm not going to hurt him. And she's like, you think I'm worried that you might hurt him? I thought that was so interesting. I guess that's her way of being like, if anything, you should be worried about yourself. Like, my hubby will kick your ass. That's what it seemed like. And I was like, oh, you know, I was like, I guess Gully, I mean, I'm sure that's the direction it's going to be, but obviously Gully seems like, as they're setting him up to be like, no, he's a lot more dangerous than you think he is, in many more ways than one. But I just thought that conversation was interesting because it's like, he's like, yeah, like Alfred admits, like, I was like, I didn't even know you existed until now. And she's like, well, he likes to basically keep his life separate, like all the other crap in his life and me, I'm supposed to gotta be kept secret from that. But she even tells him where Gully is at that garage, and it's like, why would you tell me that? She's like, I was told not to tell you, but I told you because, don't you do things you're told not to do, which I thought was kind of, an interesting thing, which I guess to a certain extent, you can make the argument, Alfie kind of does kind of do whatever, he wants. Even though he's told not to kind of do something, he kind of does it. But I'm like, okay, that was just an interesting setup that I'm like, I'm curious what that's going to be in the long run. Maybe there's going to be something bigger with that. Maybe not. We'll have to see what ends up becoming that. But then he ends up showing up there. You see like them outfitting a vehicle. So it's like, okay, so we kind of find out like, well, so the reason why he was able to do what he did for Alfie was because it's like, oh, he's in the robbing business. So I thought that was interesting. Obviously Alfie confronts him about it, and Goldie's got like a very interesting perspective, being like, we're both honorable. I'm an honorable man, and so are you, Alfie. The fact of the matter is, making whatever we do as honorable. I'm like, that's a little twisted notion. It's like, oh, we're good people, so it's like saying like, even if we do terrible things, we're good people, so the things we do are good. It's like, that's weird logic to kind of have behind that. I think, I don't know. I'm curious to see what that means. I feel like that justification is going to come up later on in some shape or form. I mean, I guess that's why he also considers, probably like, oh, it's not that bad when we're robbing people. I mean, granted, we don't know who they're robbing, because obviously it's like, it's also a lawless time right now. So it's even more so like, yeah, there's no laws to really be broken, considering like, everywhere it's kind of shit right now, But Gully says that he's not behind it, and I was like, he's lying, right? He has to be, but it's like, Alfie kind of somewhat believes him, but then it's like, well, if he didn't do it, who did it? He's even offering Alfie, Bazza, and Dave Boy a job, but obviously Alfie's like, he has his, like, it's like, yeah, they cross certain lines, but even, it's like, we kind of have our, like, there's lines we won't cross, and that's criminal stuff, and, we're not criminals, which is interesting considering, like, well, all the stuff you get up to is some criminal level stuff, but I guess you still technically stay on the right side of the law. I mean, granted, you killed people, you've done some, I mean, I guess even that's complicated considering the law isn't always the law in this universe. Well, not just this universe, but in particular in this show, but it's a whole thing. But, I love that it turns out like, oh, because even Gully was like, yeah, it's probably the people closest to you. And it turns out it was Dave Boy, because Dave Boy was running his damn mouth and he couldn't even remember who he told because he was drunk. So I thought that was so interesting. I also love, what's her name? Sherry or Sheree? Like Dave Boy being like, I'm wearing her down, it's like, she's looking at me with contempt, but I'm wearing her down. And then it turns out like, wait, she's got this huge ring on. It's the ring that Ken was peddling earlier. So it's like, okay, how does she afford that? And it's like, oh, Vic got it for me. And Dave Boy was so disgusted. He's like, Vic, you're going to turn a blind eye away. You're going to give me the cold shoulder, but Vic, basically that, almost like basically that piece of shit. I just thought that was so interesting. I was like, you're not the best catch, Dave Boy. Anyone can tell you that. But I love how offended he was. It's like, Vic, really? I'm better than Vic. He didn't say that, but it's just like his attitude about it was always so interesting. But obviously the whole. Well, I thought I'm skipping over certain things, but I should also talk about, I thought it was interesting, the conversation he had with his mom, because for his mom, she was able to save that girl. I think her name was Jackie, and it's like, oh, she's going to be okay. And he's like, really? Oh, yeah, like, because that whole situation before he left, it was so nonchalant. It's like, oh, you want me to put some tea on? She's like, no, I need the hot water to help. All right, yeah, fair play, sure, whatever. So he was so, and maybe that's the kind of the point. He's so focused on getting his money back, getting away from all of this. Because that was the thing, too, his dad was chastising him about running away, but he was like, honestly, I don't want to run away, but just obviously for him, he's just like, I can't stay here anymore. I got to take me, Mom, Bazza, and Dave Boy, we got to get out. But he's so focused on that because I think for him, it's like, that's the only thing keeping him together is having that goal, I think. But when it's all said and done, though, they go after Vic. you never know what they planned for this situation, because even Dave Boy was like, not Dave, I'm sorry, Baza was like, yeah, we should probably handle this a little different, but it's like, no, this dude isn't anything special, so it's like, we don't need to kind of do recon or anything. Things kind of turned a little ugly. Obviously, Alfie hurts his leg, gets it stuck in some wood, and home dude, Dave, Vic tries to kill him, and it's like, oh, I guess it's like, well, to be fair, he was, kicking your ass and throwing you through glass and stuff. Well, to be fair, you were throwing him through the mirrors as well. But still, it's like, did you really have to pull out a knife? Because he's like, don't do this. So, he ends up getting stabbed. I thought it was interesting, like, Sheree was still there, and he's like, oh, take the money. I was like, wait, is she about to really just straight up take? Oh, she straight up took the money. It's like, they come there, it's going. She's driving away. I was like, oh, she's about to get away with your money. And Baza had the gun pointed at her but didn't shoot. I was like, oh, she's about to get away. Oh, and then she drives into like some things, and the car explodes. I was like, oh. Well, it caught on fire, and I was like, oh, she's looking at the money, and then boom. I was like, oh, that's sad. Because for her, it's like, hey, like, that's enough money to start a new life for herself. But it's like, oh, it's kind of sad things ended that way. It's like, oh, that sucks. And they're like, yeah, sorry about the car, Baza. She was pretty damn good. And then he falls. I was like, oh, he's about to be heartbroken about his car. And it's like, oh no, Baza's hurt. I was like, shit. I was like, come on. I was like, damn, dude. But for him, he's okay with it. He's even saying, like, I'm surprised I've lived this long. And it's like, damn, dude. And he's like, you guys have to make a promise to me that you're not going to give up, that you're going to make it to America. And what his wants for everybody, he wishes that he could see, Alfie get fat and bald and rich, have a plump wife and everything. And it's like, you gotta do all this for me and everything. And I love Alfred being like, does she have to be fat? And he was like, come on, this is my dying words. He's like, all right, fair play. Fine, I'll find a plump missus, and it's trying to add some levity to the terrible situation. Dave Boy being like, all right, what do you tell? I'll do whatever you need me to do, within reason. It's like, oh, brush your teeth more. He's like, all right, I think I could do that. And was telling him something else, but passed before he could finish. And I was just like, damn, dude. Because especially, there's a whole conversation about, like, because Baza was kind of always the one that kind of kept Dave Boy in line, which isn't, even he literally said it early in the episode. It's like, it's Dave Boy. What the hell do you want me to do about it? When he pulled the knife on Ken and stuff like that was threatening. And it's like, Dave Boy kind of does. Granted, Dave Boy already had his issues. I think this is going to probably push him even further off the edge. Which now you're almost like, Dave Boy's next, isn't he? Because he's had the most run-ins throughout the course of this series. Like, once again, I brought it up last episode. It's like, every time you turn around, Dave Boy is getting fucked up in some shape or form. He's getting shot. He's getting stabbed. He's always getting messed up in some shape or form. So I'm like, I think maybe that's the whole point, too. It's like, he always kind of walks away from the situation, even though he was always the one that was kind of, amongst them, he was the most self-destructive, kind of rushing towards death in certain regards. And for it to be Baza to be the one that's going, I think maybe that's kind of why it was kind of meant to be that. Like, you're so, maybe I'm reading too much into it. But I think also that just shows, like, I don't know. Just because I'm saying that now doesn't mean that. I get the feeling like what it's probably going to do is it's going to be a situation that leaves Alfie all alone. Because these are the only other two people he has. Because, obviously him and Martha aren't on the best of terms, because Martha's like, yeah, you helped a piece of crap like Salt get away. Which, obviously, it's like, oh, he told her about Thomas and Crowley. Also, him and Thomas aren't really on really, really good terms. So, it doesn't really have anyone right now. All he has is his mom and Dave Boy now. So if Dave Boy goes and if something happens, like, he'll be all alone in this situation. And hell, for all we know, this situation is probably what's going to push him to start working with Gully, because it's like, well, we got to make money somehow, because literally all our money went up in flames. Dave Boy was already all about it, but like I said, I'm curious to see if he's going to be much more of a loose cannon now. Like, he already had his issues before, but like I said, I think losing Baz is going to send him over the edge. So we'll have to wait and see how that all ends up playing out. I think it's almost not necessary, maybe ironic, I guess, in a sense, Well, in more ways than one. Obviously, like I brought up earlier, Alfie was so focused on getting the money back that everything else kind of fell to the wayside. It ended up losing the money anyway. But I think, like I was bringing up earlier, I think this is going to send him down that route where it's like, oh, I'm an honorable... Like, he'll probably start making excuses like Gully does about... start making excuses like Gully about, like, oh, I'm an honorable man, so it's not that bad. As long as I don't do any terrible stuff, yeah, we're robbing, but as long as I'm not killing anyone along the way, it's not that bad, once again, you'll make excuses for yourself, and I think that's going to be an aspect to it. Like I said, we'll have to wait and see. But the irony, what I was actually referring to was like his mom being happy that he didn't have the money, and it's like because for her, she actually wanted him to, because she doesn't want him to go to America, and even saying be good. He was like, well, you don't need to keep telling me that. She's like, I stopped telling you to be good. I stopped telling you the moment you don't need to be told. But what I thought was interesting, because even she was excited, because she was like, yeah, the doctor said I saved her life, and I think for her, it's like, you feel a little bit of that life being breathed back into her. Sorry. I think she probably feels like, she was able to do some good, and I think that might kind of give her more of that will to keep going on, to keep living. I'm curious to kind of see where things kind of go from here. Is she going to try and do more of something like that? Is she going to try and help out more? Like, what's going to happen, Because even Alfie was like, yeah, I haven't seen you smile in a while. It's nice to see you smile again. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens on that front. Since I brought him up earlier, there's the whole Crowley situation where he's obviously tempting the Archbishop with like, basically it's like, oh, what my issues are, my sexual deviancy, I guess it would be kind of the word, I guess, and says like, oh, let me introduce you to all my other, it's like, oh, I want you to meet some friends of mine, basically like, oh, they're into some sexual stuff too, and you could tell it, the Archbishop was almost basically wetting his lips to the whole conversation. Like, no, I'll meet with him. Lo and behold, he wakes up surrounded by a whole bunch of dudes and ladies. It's a massive ass orgy. And it's like, and photo taken, put on the front of the newspaper. Obviously, the Queen's like, well, that sucks. Obviously, Francis being like, well, this is something else. And it's like, obviously, because he's an archbishop and being the prime minister for the league, he's supposed to be held to a higher standard. So that kind of, it's sad how that ends up playing out, because he ends up killing himself because of it, the shame of it all. So now you can tell, it seems like he didn't directly do it, but he's throwing his hat in the ring, being like, oh, like, maybe I should be doing it. It's like, oh, we need to find a replacement. It's like, yeah, the Archbishop, he was popular amongst people and stuff like that, but it's like, oh, someone else should throw their hat in the ring. And obviously, they're even thinking that James is the one that set the whole Crowley situation up. As we know, it was the U.S. government, and now, obviously, Martha figures it out, and she confronts Thomas, because she's like, yeah, you would do certain things because you are a cog, or rather, lever in this whole situation that is the CIA and the U.S. government and stuff, but she was like, I didn't expect you to do something as deplorable as working with someone like Crowley. For twofold. One, the Archbishop killed himself because of this whole situation. Two, it's also because it's Crowley. Like, obviously, Martha has her situation, with, and obviously you had yours as well, and that also included your sister, so, like, why would you work with someone as depraved as him? So, and obviously her being upset with him and slapping him, obviously it doesn't sit well with Thomas, because it's just like, obviously he doesn't want to do all this, but it's still like, no matter what, it's not just the whole, you're just as complicit. It doesn't matter if you're following orders. You put yourself in this situation because you could have walked away. So now it's a situation, it begs the question, was it simply to come back and check on Martha the reason why you didn't want to give up this post? Or was it actually like, you do kind of enjoy this power, and maybe that kind of play into the Crowley storyline. Who knows how much more we're going to see him this season. It'll be interesting to see, especially with the whole thing of like, sealed the deal of his friendship with the devil with the kiss and everything, but also it's like, hey, you sold your soul last season, so probably there might be more storylines with that. Like I said, I feel like that kind of goes, I brought it up last episode, that I think that kind of goes a little with potential of where Thomas's story goes. Like I said, depends on the continuity and stuff like that, but obviously some of the not so nicety stuff that gets associated with the Wayne name, in particular Thomas's name, you know, which Bruce kind of has to deal with the aftermath of that, like I said, in certain storylines. But regardless, it's going to be interesting to see where things kind of go on that front. On the other side of things, obviously we have Catherine and Bet showing up at her friend, what's his name, Dorian's place. And it's like, all right, let us in, and looking at all his paintings. And she was saying at one point, what was it, like 2 possums? Like, because it was like women pictures. And obviously for Bet, it's like, oh, he's a pervert and stuff like that. She calls up, what's his face? Harwood. And I was actually surprised when it's like, yeah, there's this lady Bet Sykes calling. He's like, oh, give me the phone. I was like, oh, so just because you're not high. I mean, to be fair, you made her a general or whatever, but it's still, I was thinking like, maybe you've forgotten about it. And he was even like, oh, so how's Peg? I was like, well, Peg's in London, so I can't really ask her for help. So I'm asking you for help. It's like, well, I kind of got in a bit of spot of trouble, you know, me and a superior officer, argy-bargy type of situation. And long story short, I killed him. And he's like, Bet, you're so incorrigible. And she's like, I know. And it's just like, what? It's this interesting dynamic they have, almost like a father and daughter relationship almost. And it's just like, all right. You can't even be like, you can't, killing a superior officer is not a thing. And she's like, yeah, I know, I'm sorry. And Francis and Salt are looking almost like, what the hell are we hearing? It's like, I guess this isn't the first time Bet's kind of gotten in trouble. I mean, to be fair, it's been a year, so we don't know all the ins and outs. But maybe that's why he sent her to that particular position, just because it's like, I give you a job, give you something stable to do. You know, it's like, but even being like, all right, Bet, this is the last time. And it's like, all right, but I'm going to have some people come pick you up and bring you here. And it's like, all right. And it's like, you know, and then you have Salt and Francis being like, you shouldn't be associated with her, but obviously she means a lot to him, because it's like, she was there for me when I was at my lowest. She helped build me back up. It's like, I would not be where I am right now. And I thought that was actually super sweet, because part of me was like, oh, he forgot the people, you know, the small people that, you know, it's like that whole thing of like, oh, when you're, you know, when you get to a higher position, don't forget about the small people that got you there. And it's like, I thought he had, but it's like, no, and she still, you know, her and Peg still mean the world to you. And I thought that was super sweet. Even though Salt and Francis are super against it. Then there's the whole situation of like, I think I think Catherine is kind of like, which is actually kind of interesting, because I just did a nerd mode about women. So it's just interesting. Once again, it's that whole thing. I just think it's just interesting, because it just made me think about it, because obviously Kate's stepmom is named Catherine. So I'm thinking too much about it. It's a common enough name. It just made me think of kind of like the Martha situation, which you can have your gripes about if you want to. You're entitled to it if you feel that way. Regardless, I'm going on a huge tangent. It's not important. It just kind of stuck out in my head. But nevertheless, oh God, where was I going? Right. But Catherine and Dorian are talking, and he's like, you know, she's like, no, that's my friend. And it's like, are you in some type of trouble? It's like, no. And it's like, well, I don't know. But it's like, she's like, she is kind of my friend. She saved my life, so she does care about me. So Catherine's a little conflicted about the whole thing, because it's like, yeah, that's kind of crazy. And she did kind of, you know, hit me and all this stuff, but it's like, honestly, she's kind of my friend. She protected me. She was there for me. So, you know, it's like, I think she, you know, she just legitimately, you know, it's like, you know, Bet's kind of a lonely person, and she's an oddball, you know, when it comes to, once again, this is kind of a repeat of the Esme situation. So it's like making friends in the most odd way, you know, it's like, you know, she's an adorable oddball, you know, Bet Sykes is. But I like Dorian being like, yeah, she seems very eccentric. Potentially deranged. She's like, no, she's not. I mean, yes, but still. You know, she kept defending her. And then it's like, what are you guys talking about? Oh, we're talking about art? No, you weren't. You're talking about me. And she pulls out the gun and she's waving it around and actually shoots off a shot. And she's like, oh, sorry about that. This gun is new to me. I'm like, dude, I never noticed it before. I'm not reading too much. I'm not going to read too much into it, because there's nothing to it. But it's like, she has some very like Harley-esque elements to her in certain regards. Sights, Bet, she kind of just, I don't know. Like I said, I'm reading too much into. I'm not. It's just like certain aspects about her kind of reminds me of like how off the wall and weird and crazy and kind of messed up Harley is. So that it just made me think of some similarities between her. I never even thought about that season 1 until just now. I was like, there's a little Harley in that. But regardless, And then, like, obviously, now Bet's questioning Catherine because Catherine's like, this is my friend. He's innocent. He didn't do anything. And, it's like, oh, you're probably not even an artist. It's like, and Dorian's like, honestly, she's actually really good. It's basically like, shut up. Who even asked you? Then the police show up and it's like, well, of course it'd be the police. Who else would be, because she's thinking like, oh, these are the people come to pick us up. Dorian gets riddled with bullets. Obviously, Bet grabbed Catherine and bounced. But obviously, as we can see, Catherine is actually a really good artist because she was actually starting to draw Bet, which I think it's like, oh, I thought it was kind of interesting. She never said draw me. Well, she did the last time, but not this time. So it makes you wonder, like, I'm curious to see where that storyline goes with them. But it's like, okay, so I assume the person who did that was Salt. I mean, it might have been Francis, but I feel like that's more so probably Salt being like, honestly, like, this woman's too much trouble. Like I said, it seems like she's gotten in trouble before, considering he was like, this would be the last time. I get this feeling like he's had to bail her out of situations. I brought it up earlier. I think that's probably why she had the position she was in, because he thought it would probably do her some good to be in a position like that. He wanted to reward her by being in a higher position, but I think it was also just like, oh, this is a job that I feel like you'll excel at, and also, I don't know, give you some, I don't know what the right wording would be. Like, he just thought it would be a good fit for Bet. Turned out not to be the case. But, I'm curious what that situation is implying. Like, whether or not that was a whole, whether or not that was was it just the police coming upon them? Or was this Salt or Francis? I get the feeling it was like Salt or Francis, because obviously, like, Harwood would not be down for anyone trying to kill Bet. But it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. It's going to be interesting to see where all of this goes. Well, like I said, this was a back-to-back episode, so I'll get answers to where all this is going next. So, and now moving on to the next episode 4 of, Pennyworth. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, picking up after the events of the last episode, Alfie's kind of overridden by guilt about the whole Baza situation because he blames himself, especially in the dream, because in his dream, it manifested as Dave Boy blaming him and then Baza blaming him. It's like, no, you said, like, you made me promise that we get to America. He's like, I didn't. I just said that to make you feel better, Alfie. He's like, I'm dead, and it's because of you. It's like, basically, Alfie's like, well, I'm going to make it to America. I'm going to do whatever it takes, so fuck off, So... But still, he's just ridden by his own guilt. Obviously, at the funeral, Dave Boy, whistling and everything. And it's like, just stop. Baz always hated your terrible whistling. He's like, well, he's not complaining now. It's like having to, And they even brought back, I think it was that drink he was offering Baza, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's the same drink that he was saying, like, at my funeral, have the good stuff. And, so I think that's kind of that coming full circle, I think. But obviously it hits, like I said, each one of them is going to be taking it in their own way. I feel like the person we've seen kind of affect the most is Baza. Dave Boy seemed like he could be still the same, but I still feel like, once again, it is that thing that, yeah, Baza couldn't always rein Dave Boy in, but he could a lot more often than not, And so obviously, Gully's there at the funeral, which obviously he's not just there to pay his respects, I thought was interesting because I thought Alfie would seek him out. I didn't expect it to be, no, he seeks Alfie out, being like, oh, work for, it's like, you knew that, it wasn't just about Baza. You knew that we lost the money, so, because obviously for him, it's like, I didn't listen to what Baza said, and we got outdone by a cocktail waitress. I didn't see all the pieces of how this could have gone wrong, once again, as Dave Boy was telling him, and that's what it was Baza in the dream. It's like, it's all about money. It's like, and he kind of feels that, whether, he realizes or not. Like, I had brought that up last episode, like, he's so focused on the money, he lost sight on so many, the episode made a point to kind of point it out that he's lost sight on many different angles, so... I thought that was interesting. But working with Goalie, they end up robbing some dude who has like a whole bunch of gold bricks. Granted, like obviously, like when they blew the door, the explosion kind of... I mean, granted, Alfie's already got some PTSD. We saw that last season, but it hadn't really triggered at all this season. But obviously, like after what happened to Baza and his own guilt combined with everything, he lost his shit and he was beating the crap out of that dude. But Dave Boy was telling him to stop, and then eventually Goalie had to tell him to stop. But like, Alfred was just like, I need to get this money because, like, once again, it's just another thing he has to, run from. It's like everything with his dad, everything that's going down in London now. Baza, it's like even more reason to get out. Because I think that was almost, his own guilt his conscience trying to make him feel guilty because it's like, I'm dead. It's because of you and your need, because he's the one that kind of dragged Dave Boy and Baza into this whole, like, going to America thing. I mean, it doesn't seem like that was there. I mean, we don't know. Like, it might not even been their idea. It might have been Alfie's. So this has always been his idea, his plan. So anyone dying because of it, it falls back on him even more so. But it's just like, he's like, I gotta get this money, or Baz's death is going to mean nothing, and then, like, I need to get out of here because I made a promise, and also, like, I just need to get away from London. I need to get out, so the job was successful. They got the gold bars, but when it was all said and done, they're back celebrating and stuff. And obviously, one of Goalie's men is just kind of being all like, losing his damn mind. Obviously, for Alfie, it's like, I'm not trying to get people drawn to us. I don't think I'm better than you. I'm not looking down on you guys, nor do I feel pride about this situation either. It's just, it is what it is. I need my money. That's all, Alfie really cares about. Obviously, Dave Boy and Home Dude go at it. And obviously that also leads to the thing because obviously Melanie's kind of making some wisecracks because for her, she doesn't think it's like, oh, like are you really Gully's boy? It's like, I'm nobody's boy. Like, cause obviously for Alfie, it's like, I'm my own man. And, and then, like, I thought it was kind of interesting because as she's kind of being, like, a little sarcastic, he's like, you're drunk. And he's getting, like, he's got that look in his eye. And that look comes in fold when he slaps her. I was like, it seemed like that. Sadly, it seemed like that was coming. Like, in a sense, it looked like one of those situations like, watch your mouth, woman. Like, it just from the beginning, it seemed like it was going to be that. And obviously, Alfie doesn't stand for that. But then there's a complicated thing of him like, you want to beat your wife, do it at home, not at my establishment. I would have been like, yeah. How about you just don't beat your wife? I think that would have been the perfect thing to say, but that also shows you, like, Alfie's just kind of like, whatever your business is, I'm not getting in the middle of it. Just don't get it here where my business is, which is also messed up. Because it's interesting because, like, obviously, like, once again, he's trying to remind Sandra, like, don't be with me. I'm not good for you. I've told you that before. She's like, you're working with that guy, Goalie, right? It's like, I don't trust him. It's like, yeah, but I do. It's like, do you really trust Goalie, or is it just a situation where you're so desperate that you're like, fine, I'll work with him just because it's like, I guess because it's that camaraderie from, like, him being, like, the captain when y'all were in the military. But I think there's that, plus also him being, like, the only viable option right now because you need quick cash so you can hurry up and get the hell out of London. I think it's kind of, an element to that. But then, like, there's a back and forth between Gilly and Alfie, them both kind of asserting dominance in the situation, both holding knives to each other, and like, all right, he's like, I'll remember, I'm not the captain anymore, but it's like, I got one more job, and like, Alfie's like, I want nothing to do with it, I got enough money, that's enough for me. It's like, I need your help, friend. If it's like, yeah, I love that we're talking about a friend situation, you literally had knives to each other, but I guess it's kind of like, it's that complicated relationship of like, yeah, our history matters more so than anything else. It's like, we might not be in the military, but we have this, it might not be in the military anymore, but we had this history between us, and that's what, that comes first. This bond we have is thicker than blood type of thing, maybe. I don't know. But regardless, I'm like, yeah, you setting this situation up makes me feel like Gilly's gonna stab you in the back. Just because it's like, oh, you question his authority. He's like, I mean, to be fair, he was deranged, but that's what kind of happened with the Esme situation last season. It's like you made a wisecrack, but Gilly seems like the type of person. I mean, obviously we saw what he did with Melanie. It's like he doesn't appreciate someone questioning his authority, and you just question his. So it's like he'll probably get help with the next job, and then he'll probably screw you over. I don't know. I mean, once again, with like Sandra, I don't trust him, but we'll see where things kind of go from there. Then he's also making out with Melanie, and she slaps him because it's like, I don't know whether you're brave or stupid. And he's like, both. And it's like, I was almost halfway expecting Sandra to be there to see that, because I would assume like he would kind of, Alfie's in kind of a very self-destructive mood right now. Like I said, because of his guilt, because of what happened to Baza, and I think it's a situation where he wants to try to do the right thing. He doesn't want to be a criminal, like, Melanie was kind of saying, like, yeah, I know this life doesn't, you're not all about it, you don't see the honor in it like maybe Gilly does. But I think I think it is just all wearing on him, and he's just, I don't know. Like I said, he's just not in the best mindset. It's just one thing after another. And for him, it's like his goal of getting to America. It's like, if I don't, it gives him something to do. Because if it doesn't, I think if he takes too long to sit back, he needs something. He needs a goal to focus on. Because if he does, I think he's gonna fall apart. So it's gonna be interesting to see where things kind of go from there after that whole complicated thing. Especially if Gilly finds out you made moves on his wife. Oh, that's definitely going to be a situation of like, oh, you didn't think I'd find out, you're done. We see the abusive relationship, the power dynamic in that relationship as well. So it's just kind of like, I mean, to be fair, it did seem like she was kind of like the whole, it just seemed like, I don't know, when you look back on that situation, her at home watching TV, and it's like, oh, Gilly never mentioned me. She's like, oh, he's separating his personal life. I mean, maybe there's that, but also it's just like, it almost makes it, I mean, and I think this may lean into that, is him seeing her as more of a property, seeing people as property and things, a means to an end. It's kind of, it might not just be his wife, it might be people in general he sees that way, Alfie included. But we'll see how things on that front kind of turn about. So, other angles in this episode is the whole election for the next prime minister position and stuff like that. Obviously, John threw his name in a hat, and obviously brings out some criminals, and it's just like, yeah, he's like, we literally have a whole army of people. Just bring out some of them, give them guns, and we got this on our side. And it's like, obviously, some of the people there were rallying behind it. Obviously, Martha wasn't too keen on that, like, because even the Queen was like, really, we're going to let out criminals? Like, but also the thing, these are criminals. Who's this? But, to be fair, in this universe, we're used to Arkham Asylum criminals. And I'm like, you wouldn't trust anyone that's probably criminally insane, and done the stuff that they've done. So I would kind of put it in the same ballpark in this regard. But it's like, it's a situation where it's like it's almost like, I was about to make an analogy, but I'm like, that analogy would kind of be fucked up, so I won't go down that route. But it's just like, obviously you see like, okay, I get where you're coming from, but at the same time, it's like, who's to say you can trust said criminals when they have their freedom? But I guess it's like, if because, the thing would be that, because John's saying like the benefit to this would be that the Queen would pardon them, so it's like, that's interesting. But obviously Aziz is like, yeah, but let's not do that. Yeah, it could work out for us, sure. But at the end of the day, it's like, we don't want to lose our humanity along the way, because like, we can win battles this way, sure, but we will lose the war in the end of the day, because they will look back on us and look at all the heinous stuff. History does not favor those who do such terrible things, because even him kind of saying like, if we went down that route, everyone would be speaking German right now, kind of implying like, obviously the Nazis doing the evil shit that they did, if that kind of went and everyone just kind of was on board with it, we wouldn't be where we are right now. So it is a situation of, we need to keep our conscience, we need to keep love, we need to keep that humanity, because good people, long after we're gone, will pick up the mantle and continue that fight. That's how you win the war. Yeah, you can win battles this way, but you get down in the muck, you get dirty, you get nasty. That will only get you so far. In the long run, you will have people's support and belief in you if you keep those values strong. Keep it more than just values. Keep these principles alive. And obviously a lot of people, in particular Martha, praised him. And obviously you can tell John's not too happy about it, because obviously this was, I mean, even he kind of admitted that he's the opportunist that he is. Obviously the whole thing with the No Name League. Now this, he's always looking for a position. I mean, obviously he's all about power. He's kind of run things his way. And, he's very cutthroat in that regard. We kind of already know. So his method of handling this is kind of no surprise. But obviously for Aziz, it's like, we need to kind of bolster up London and we can't let it fall. It's what they have planned. So there's that side of things. Then you then you have the whole Martha and Thomas thing. It's like, yeah, Patricia, she needs help. She's at this party with this dude named Jack. So yeah, he's kind of and apparently he has ties to Gotham too. Some very nasty ties to Gotham. Based on what like Thomas was saying he has done, and Martha was like, for real? And it's like, yeah, I don't want my sister anywhere near him. They go to the party. It's interesting, and it's like, oh, you come on, Patricia kind of keeping it blunt, being like, you two obviously want to fuck each other. It's like, no. But we also found out a tidbit, like, oh, he dumped his fiance. And it's like, oh, When was that? Was it after you ran into Martha again and all those feelings start spiraling up? That's why I was like, was it just legitimate? I guess it was legit because I assumed like him being with her, whoever's fiance that we never really got to know. I assumed it was about a family situation. Like it was like his family was I thought it was kind of like an arranged marriage type of situation. I guess not. I guess it was his way of kind of potentially getting over Martha because I guess he didn't know if he'd ever see her again. But, once again, there's still a lot in that year period we don't know kind of what went down in a lot of people's lives, like the exact parts to everything. But regardless, Patricia gets proposed to. Obviously, they're trying to... I wonder what the plan was, because initially, it's like, oh, Jack was coming over to her place for a dress and stuff like that, but I guess Patricia and Thomas were there just so she wouldn't be alone. I don't know, because like Thomas was like, oh, we supposed to meet up. I was like, I guess they were going to have like an intervention, I guess was going to be like the whole point of it. They never really explained what that was about, but I'm assuming it was meant to be like an intervention. Maybe, maybe not, but regardless, by the time... which I thought that was so interesting. It's like, oh, like obviously Thomas is trying to scare her away. It's like, yeah, being married, oh no, it means quick to have kids. But she's like, well, then we'll just do anal. And he's like, Jesus. And even I'm like, Jesus. And it's like, Alfred walks by. It's like, what are you two talking about? We're talking about anal. It's like, could you stop, Patricia? Nevertheless. But luckily they show up in time. Well, Martha had to lay the smack down on Jock because he tried to make a move on her, literally walking out naked. He's like, oh, I know what you want. And obviously it's like, oh, both of them walking in, being the siblings they are, being like, what the fuck? And obviously Patricia chasing him naked down the street. And obviously Martha enjoying it because she's like, oh, I've never beat up someone naked before. It's a new experience. And then lo and behold, sparks start flying because obviously Patricia had earlier was making fun of him. Like, obviously you're in love, you're smitten with her. He's like, I'm not, and it's like, you are. So I'm assuming after running into Martha again is when he ended his engagement. Maybe. Well, either way, they do their thing and it's like, okay, this is interesting. There's some stuff that was said during DC Fandom. I'll go ahead and say it that like, oh, Martha's going to get pregnant this season, so I'm like, is this going to be the moment? Be ironic because he made that whole point about like, oh, like getting married and having kids. It's like, oh, and I was wondering, we already know they're going to have Bruce, obviously, but I was wondering is that going to be the moment? Like, oh, she gets pregnant in that moment. And I was like, oh, that's the irony behind it. Like you were talking about your sister and lo and behold, maybe not. Maybe I'm reading too much into that. I took that seriously, but maybe that's not the case. Maybe that was Bruno Heller being joking, or maybe it was serious. I don't know. I took it as literal, but maybe that's not the case. Whatever the case may be. So it's going to be interesting to see where that goes, especially now that, hey, they've kind of, and it's obviously, it's been there the entire time. Even despite Martha being pissed at him, she can't help how she feels about him, and he can't help the way he feels about her, because it seems like he's felt a way about her, like, it's, because even Patricia was like, oh yeah, she's a serious woman. You're usually into like girls. I think like people who party who aren't that serious about it. Like you're never been in love with like a like serious and passionate woman like her. So it's going to be interesting to see obviously what continued effect this relationship has, potential relationship has on both of them going forward, what this looks like, whether they look at this as a relationship or they go like, no, it was fun what we did, but that's all it was, because maybe she hasn't quite forgiven him. And, it's going to be interesting to see where things, go on that front. On the other side of things, we had the whole situation with Bet and Catherine getting in a no-name I'm not the no name, but just the league territory. And it's like, oh, that lady's like, oh, will I see you again? She's like, maybe not, and kisses her. But she's like, but you never know, and smacks on her butt. I was like, did you like bang that lady to get y'all right? It's like, yo. Or is it just, or you just like whispering sweet nothings to her or something like that? I'm curious. It's like, oh, you can be quite the charmer when you want to be, can't you? That's interesting. But, it's like they go to try to find Peg, but her place is kind of shut down and boarded up. So it's like they have no idea where to look. And obviously, Catherine's like, oh, maybe we should split up. And Bet's like, what? no, why would we do that? Because it's like, oh, splitting up better chance. It's like, I mean, I'm in league territory now, so I'm fine. So I'm not in trouble. She's like, yeah, but not me, you know? And it's like, why would you even need me? She's like, well, there is such thing as moral support. We are friends, aren't we? And she's like, yeah, well, kind of. She's like, kinda? It was like, she was so heartbroken by that. But then it's like, you know, but then Catherine starts getting psychological, being like, you know, you haven't talked about your past at all. It's like, you know, what happened to you? Did something had to happen to you for you to be the way you are, the way you basically jump, you get so mad. And she's like, what are you talking about? And it's like, she's like, all right, fine. I also love that Bet crosses paths with the dude that got robbed by Alfie and Gully. And it's like, oh, no, you're going to be fine. We'll call the police. And Catherine's like, look at you. And she's like, oh, look, things are going up. And it's like, should we call the police? Why? Because he needs help. Oh, look at you, you big softy. And then they're calling the police, but I don't know if they actually fully call the police until, because obviously she gets distracted by, hey, I know where Peg is. Peg's opened a shop, I forgot what it's called. It's basically like Pain for Sale or something like that. I know that's not the name, but it's Pain something. So taking her passions and just her, I mean, I guess that's just, well, that's her job in general, like the whole dominatrix thing. And, you know, she just has a full-blown store for it, you know, all that. And obviously Peg is like, oh, hey, sis, I called you at work, but they said you're on the run for murder. And she's like, it's not murder if you're in the right? I'm like, oh, I love your reasoning. It's still murder even if you think you're right. It doesn't take away the fact that it's still murder. But obviously I take that back because there's going to be the whole thing of like, well, there's self-defense. So it's like, well, you were in defense of Catherine, you know, but regardless. But it's like, all right, Peg, I haven't told her about my past, and you're going to keep that up too. And it's like, you keep doing the same thing over and over again. Obviously, her seeing the Esme parallels. But I'm wondering, does this even go further than Esme? Like, has this always, like, maybe, like, she's always found a wounded pet that she's always taken in, you know, whether that's figurative, as in, like, it's a person that she's always finds herself infatuated with and becomes obsessed with, or whether it means it can be literal, as in she's taken in wounded animals as well. I'm curious where things kind of go on that front. It's like, well, we're back with Peg again, so I'm curious to see where things kind of go on this front. What's also clear about this episode too is that it definitely was Salt that sent them after. Not unless it was someone else on their own, but I figured it didn't seem like Frances's style because she wouldn't do that, but it's like, I wasn't sure, but it's like, it's definitely Salt. Especially because it's like, yeah, it seems like she ran away, we were investigating it. It's like, bullshit. The dead body, the bullet holes at that place, yeah. So obviously it's like, okay, so you're trying to remove remove Bet from the situation. Well, why? But now we kind of see, because they're in his way, because obviously it's like, okay, because you have them trying to decide what they're going to do next, because obviously they're spending so much time and manpower trying to go after like Manchester and stuff like that. But it's like, if we can take down London, all the other places will fall in line as well. So it's like, how are we going to do this? We can't bomb it and attack it, because if we do, we're going to look like the monsters in history, because like we're going to have destroyed London and stuff like that. So it's like, no, what are we going to do? So once again, Salt suggests Stormcloud. Obviously, Gaunt being the one against it. Obviously, you have James losing his shit, kind of having a tantrum, and then he starts kind of like, coughing because he's like sick and just wants to be left alone. And his Salt brings him. So I was like, how do we know Salt's... At first I was almost like, is Salt secretly poisoning him or something like that? Before he even gave him the pills, I was like... But then I'm like, you're really trusting of that dude. But then he makes like a whole point about like, Miss Gaunt, Frances, she's strong in her beliefs, no matter what cost it may cost her or anyone else. And then later on, James is talking with Frances about... Obviously, she's checking on him because for a second I was like, all right, you're a doctor. I completely forgot that's how we got introduced to you first, before it was revealed that you had taken over the Raven Society back in season 1 during that period of time. But I just thought that was interesting. I just let that slip my mind. But regardless, then Harwood starts acting a little weird. And it's like, obviously, he's like, he wishes he had Peg and Bet by his side. And then, like, partway through the conversation, he's like, oh, hey, there you are, my dear. It's like, no, what were you talking about? And you're like, oh, okay. And the moment that happened, I was like, it's got to be, well, either he's just kind of messed up in his head just because he's just naturally sick, or I'm not sure. Because obviously, like, you have Francis trying to find a more diplomatic way of handling this situation. A more, I guess, democratic, I guess, approach. In the sense of trying to say, like, oh, Aziz is someone that we can talk to. Obviously, James is like, no, Aziz is the one that arrested me, and he's the one that just sat back while I was in my underwear being tortured. So it's like, bump him. Obviously, he's probably not as high on the list as the previous prime minister before the Archbishop, the other prime minister from season 1. Probably not as high on that list, but still kind of like probably still on Harwood's fuck you list. Well, most definitely. But I don't know whether it's just naturally that Harwood's sick, or whether it is that secretly Salt is making him sick. Now, obviously, he's trying to, like, spin, Francis by being like, oh, it's like, oh, he's not in the right frame of mind. And it's for her, it's like, that sounds like treachery. It's like, oh, no, you're right. But you're in a position, you can potentially meet up with this Aziz fellow. And obviously, he's trying to plant those seeds of doubt. So I'm like, okay. So now he's trying to remove everyone that Harwood relies on, because Francis will always keep him at a distance from Harwood. Obviously, Harwood is more willing to listen to him, but it's like Francis is still a roadblock that he needs to deal with. So he's trying to get rid of her. He got rid of Bet to a certain extent, because these are people that would convince him to do otherwise, people to get in his way. But then part of me is also wondering, could it be that could he be trying to get rid of them and then get close enough to Harwood so that once he takes Harwood out, this whole situation becomes his own? Because it seems like he's more so than anything, he just seems like he's all about the experiments. But I think it's like, if Harwood doesn't have them whispering in his ear, kind of being his, I guess, quote unquote, better angels, then, the devil on his shoulder that is Salt can kind of just do whatever he wants to. Like, it seems like the research is what he wants, but I don't know if he just wants to be like, nah, I want to be in this powerful position because I want to run things. I don't want to be a doctor of death or something like that. I don't know. But this episode also presented a really interesting thing as we get introduced to Lucius Fox. Obviously, they brought it up during DC fandom that he would be in this season. I didn't expect these to be the circumstances he'd get introduced under. So obviously, he's there, bearing witness to, like, the test of, like, Stormcloud, and obviously seeing what it's capable of. Obviously, Francis seeing it firsthand. Obviously, she's flabbergasted and disgusted by, obviously, Harwood's all about it. Like, you see the smirk on his face. Saying, yes, this would be the perfect weapon. And, even Salt making that comment of, like, 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, it dissipates. Even a child can play here. Yeah, a child playing amongst their dead bodies. Yeah. It's like, Jesus. Dude's, I mean, especially when he was talking to Gaunt and his eyes were all wide. I'm like, man, this dude is creepy ass shit. I mean, kind of pretty clear when he got first introduced. But nevertheless, the big thing from that, though, is the Lucius Fox situation. Is like, what are his circumstances? Obviously, he's recording all of this, which makes you wonder, is that his... I mean, obviously, we know he's the tech dude. So it makes you wonder, is that... Like, is this is like early, obviously this is the 60s, so he's limited, but it's like, did anyone else come up with all that? Like, obviously the camera being in the badge and the recorder being in his shoe, it's like, did he set that up ahead of time? Or, I mean, did he make all that, or was that someone else? Because now I'm wondering, like, is he there because the league sent him in, but it doesn't seem like he necessarily has any ties to the league. So then another part of me is like, did he get involved in it on his own? Or is he dragged into this because he's a scientist, but then it's like... I actually don't know fully, because I know he runs basically the R&D department eventually at Wayne Enterprises. But I'm like... he has to be a scientist and stuff like that, considering the fact is all the, gadgets and stuff that he makes for Bruce. My voice cracked there, jeez. But I don't know what to make of his circumstances or why he's there. Obviously they don't fill you in. Like I said, I don't know whether like the Raven Society, the Raven Union got him specifically, or was he already working? Did he get dragged into this because he wanted to, and he later on found out, oh, this is the terrible stuff they're up to, so now he's spying on them, or was he implanted before now, and now he's just kind of being active? I'm curious to see, learn, how Lucius found himself in this situation, and what his, obviously, regardless of how he found himself in it, his aim is clear that he wants to expose what they're up to. Now, whether it's to let the Union know, because also forget about the side of things. So let's not forget obviously we know the CIA is involved. So, because I guess it's like they need to keep an eye on that, because that could be something that could be used against them in the future. So they might have, on that side of the pond, Thomas might not be their only asset, but we'll have to wait and see where everything takes us going forward into the next episode. I'm very interested to see where it all takes us. But really, that's all I want to talk about today. Next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.